idea of the Shtei Halechem being the mitzvah Yom Shavuos, while on other Chagim, they're more well-known mitzvahs. The Shtei Halechem is not as well-known because it only takes place when there's a Beis Hamikdash. We haven't had one in 2,000 years, so we're not as familiar as we usually are with the mitzvah Yom. Okay, so let's look at the Shtei Halechem. We know that we get to Shavuos. Shavuos doesn't really have a date on the calendar. It's just 50 days after Pesach, right? So there's no like on this day of this month you should celebrate Shavuos. It's just 50 days after you start counting, and you start counting when you give the Korban Omer. Right? Where we have like a whole skewed understanding of Shiur Omer. Shiur Omer is a happy time. It's not a depressing time. It became a depressing time when Rabbi Akiva's students died. So then that became a depressing time. But really, Shiur Omer, the Ramban in his Parish in the Torah explains, it's like the time period of these 49 days is one long Chol HaMoed. It's like, well, it's the bridging between Pesach and Shavuos. It's a very happy time. That's very hard to comprehend, but that's really what it is. We count now. Omer like seems synonymous with Avelos, with mourning, but it's not. It's really a happy time. The Omer also, we say, okay, when do we start counting the Omer? The second day of Pesach, which is like a weird thing, like, right, the second night of Pesach. So it's like, well, why the second night of Pesach? What happened second night of Pesach, right? Like, so the second night of Pesach, there was the Korban Omer. They would go out to the fields near Mevaseret in a place called Motza, and they would cut wheat. That was like the first harvest. So they would cut wheat, and they would bring the wheat to the Beis Hamikdash, and that was the Korban Omer. Okay, and what the Korban Omer did was, there's an Isser in the Torah called Chadash, which most people have no idea what Chadash is. Even people that keep Chadash don't know what it is. Most Jews keep Chadash because they're in Israel, and in Israel, unless you're going to import, I'll explain what I'm talking about. Unless you're going to import it from outside of Israel, you can't get Chadash. Chadash is when new wheat grows from whenever it grows. It's usually sometime in anywhere between July and October. So you can't use that wheat that you've cut until the second day of Pesach, until you give the Korban Omer. The Korban Omer allows you to use that new wheat. So in Israel, we don't have this because we only have one harvest. In America, you have two harvests. You have Chadash. Some people keep it in America, some people don't. Today's Shiur is not a Chadash. But so the point is that people in Israel don't even know about it because imagine a place where you could only get kosher foods. You wouldn't even know about kosher anymore. You never have to think about it. So that's what Israel is in regards to Chadash and Yashan. People have no idea. It's just completely out of their minds because you never have to even think about it. So in any case, that's when you give this second korban. Imagine if you were a farmer and you had all this wheat in your storehouse and you were storing it for 6 months until Pesach, and in Pesach you can start using this wheat. So, or maybe you converted it to flour already. I don't really know the agriculture behind it, but if you had it, you can use it until then. So now you have the Korban Omer is given, and then all of a sudden you can start using this new flour. At that point, you count 49 days. And 49 days on the 50th day, the day after you stop counting. So that is Shavuos, and that's when you give the what's called the Shtei Halechem. The Shtei Halechem are 2 loaves of bread, okay? And they're called Mincha Chadasha. If you look at source number 2 here, so what does this do? Lahatir Chadash v'mikdash, Yehuzman Bishul Tfuah. So this is when they were allowed to use Chadash outside the Beis Hamikdash starting from Pesach, but now the new wheat, Chadash, the new wheat, as opposed to Yashan, is now allowed to be used in the Beis Hamikdash on Shavuos. Good? Exciting stuff. Okay, great. Okay, so that's what the story behind it is. It's actually a big deal back in the day. Back in the day, it's a very big deal. Now, today, if you're careful about Chadash, which you can be in America, when we lived in America, we were careful about it. It was our main excuse not to have to eat at the Schreiber house. So that was right. So that gets you out of everything. So Chadash, we were able to keep it when we lived in America. We kept it. Most people don't, but you can. And like the Orthodox Union, the OU, they're not careful about it. They feel that they're not. You can get OU Chadash stuff because it's chutzarts, they feel it's mutter. So that's the story. Okay.
Just know every time you did come over, like twice, we fed you tray. Just to,
Yeah, I figured.
yeah.
Okay, so you okay for one. So the truth is we didn't eat, but it's just food around. So the cats were well fed. So anyway, so the Gemara Nachos. So it's good to laugh. So the Gemara Nachos says like this: Okay, so now we get into real kachim stuff. I happen to be in like a time period in my life right now where I'm like fully involved in kachim, and I have to tell you, like I really suggest it. Like I'm learning the Seder kachim with my son with Moshe, and it's just stuff about the Beis Hamikdash. It's like nothing else but the Beis Hamikdash. And we learned. I really suggest this. I really suggest learning. It's only like 8 pages. The Mishnayos first, and then the small amount of Gemara on it. First of all, you make a siyum in it's the shortest Masechta. You make a siyum in like a day. So I'm learning with Moshe and stuff, and then also my students in Chicago about the Beis Hamikdash. And it at first it's unfamiliar stuff, and it gets very difficult, and you're confused a little. But then once you start to become familiar with what's going on, and you start to like learn more and more and get involved in it, the Beis Hamikdash stuff is very exciting. You know, like we read the psukim a lot of times, like a par here and an idol there and a keves here, and you're like, sheep, rams, okay, this stuff's all there. It seems like the Beis Hamikdash is a petting zoo, and their stuff is all over the place. You have no idea what's going on. But once you start realizing like the daily order, it builds excitement about the Beis Hamikdash. Like, and you live on like almost like a different plane of existence. If you're living in this world, like the current events now where you don't have a Beis Hamikdash and everything is like a replacement of the Beis Hamikdash, but then there's like a part of you that's living in this like fantasy world of like, oh, as soon as I open my sefer again, I'm gonna step back into the Beis Hamikdash. It's just fascinating. Anyway, so this Gemara is completely about what happens in the Beis Hamikdash. So and Menachos is part of the Seder of Kachim, which is all about the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says as follows: Gemara says, "Apar ve'elim b'tvasim b'asir." So when they gave the Shtei Halechem, when they gave these loaves of bread, so they gave with it these animals as korbanos. Okay, and the Gemara opens up by saying that the animals are not ma'akev the bread. Ma'akev means that you're not yotzei with it. Now, if it's ma'akev, if this thing is ma'akev, that means that you're not yotzei the mitzvah without doing it. So it says the animals are not ma'akev the lechem. Meaning if you messed up on the animals, you didn't have animals, they just brought the lechem, the Shtei Halechem, you still fulfill the mitzvah of the Shtei Halechem. It's not ma'akev. And also, if you didn't have the lechem, you could still get the animals. You'd still be yotzei. Okay, which seems to suggest that they're independent entities, one or the other, right? That they're not tied into each other. Okay, it's similar to think about it to what we were saying in terms of tefillin. When we learned tefillin, so we learned, I don't know if we learned tefillin together, but I learned tefillin, so I don't know. But you can see the Shel Rosh and the Shel Yad are independent entities. If you only had one, you would wear only one, right? They're not tied into each other. Okay, so halecha ma'akev is a kvasim, but then you have another opinion that says that the bread is ma'akev the kvasim. If you didn't have bread, you wouldn't be able to give the sheep. But the other way is not true. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, low. No, Rabbi Akiva got it wrong. The sheep are ma'akev the lechem, but lechem eno ma'akev is a kvasim, and the bread doesn't prevent the kvasim from being given. Okay, second opinion. When the Jews were in the desert for 40 years, they gave the sheep, but they didn't have the bread. They didn't give the bread, and they still gave the sheep. So I was okay. Afkan, you can grow kvasim b'ol lechem. So now we can also do that. Right? It's not just in the midbar. Amar Rishon halacha k'divrei benanos. He passes very benanos. Aval ein atam k'dvar. He's right on the psak. He's wrong on the reasoning. Okay, so he says why? Shekol Amar b'chumash hakudim karav b'midbar b'chomer b'torah sepanim ein karav b'midbar. Yishbol aretz karav elovelu. So what happened in the midbar was one thing. What happens in Eretz Yisrael when you cross over, right? So now something else happens. If not money, I'll marry grew a kvasim b'ol lechem. So could I really give the sheep without the bread? Because the kvasim are mutter on their own. You can give a keves, you can give a sheep in the Beis Hamikdash whenever you want, right? So that you don't need bread for that. Okay. So lo halachem below kvasim shein lo miyatirenu. And how could you give bread? You have to just walk up with bread and make something. What are you doing? Right? What's two guys walking around with bread? See, like, what is that? Yeah. So if you come with a lamb, okay, I get it. So it's tied into the korban. I understand. Okay, somehow this is accompanying a korban. But just bringing lechem by itself, the Gemara argues, so that's nothing. It doesn't work. That's not how it works. So the Gemara goes on here. Over here says Alechem Akiv is a in my time with Rabbi Kiva. So what's Rabbi Kiva's opinion? How does he argue against this? Gomer Yomitiana Malahalam Lechem Afkam Lechem. So he learns it from Tiana that other kabbanos there was lechem, so here too you have to have lechem. Okay, fine. We got to go through all four of those opinions and explain it. That's our challenge. Okay, we have to see conceptually how they understood the role of keves and the role of lechem. Okay, that's the debate. Is that clear? Right. I mean, to see the opinions, you need a chart. At least I do. I have trouble seeing more than two opinions at once without a chart, and I have a chart in front of me. But if you, but in any case, you have to see the different opinions. So it basically centers around: can you have a sheep without bread on Shavuos, and can you have bread without a sheep? That's the question. Okay. The Rambam says as follows: Shtei Halechem, right? You can't give one challah without the other. And you can't give just one sheep. You have to have two sheep. If one of the two die, you set aside two. You have them all ready to go, and then one died. So, Baruch ran away. Nasa treifa, or it turns out that it's terminally ill. Yikach zug sheni. So you just grab another sheep. Shachad echad l'shmo, yikach lo zug. Okay, fine. So even if you already shechted one, no problem. Just throw in another one. There's times that it doesn't work. Like the Siyar Misaleach on Yom Kippur, the two sheep that we picked out, one goats, one you throw out and one you keep. So that's a whole process. If one of them gets lost, one of them dies. It's not so simple. You can't just pull in another one from the bullpen. You got to have there's a lot of process that has to go into it. Okay. The pasuk says right? This is the Yisr Chadash, right? So bread and all the different grains you can't eat until this day. Okay, Kol Asurim, the Rambam says, sorry, hold on, let me get this up here. Kol Isurim, Shamarno Hein B'minei Nefesh Chaya, right? So the Rambam says that everything that we discussed in Hilchos Malchos Asuros, right? That's the set of halachos that we're looking at. Before this, right? So right? There are other things that are usher, not just animals that you can't eat, right? Or animals mixed with milk that you can't eat. There's also agricultural products that are usher. And one of those is chadash that we're talking about. And then we saw this in the introductory share. I'm not going to go through the whole thing what chadash is, especially since like a couple minutes ago I just gave a basic rundown of what it is. Okay, and then in source number 9, we have the Gemara says Mishparava Omer. So it says Hutar Chadash Miyad. Once the Omer was given, right? So Chadash was mutar right away, the mitzvah. Omer Ho Matil Medina V'Shtei Halechem Mikdash. So the Omer was on Pesach was matir Mikdash out in the whole country. Okay, and then the Shtei Halechem on Shavuos was matir Chadash inside the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so very simple. We ask the question, what is the nature of this mitzvah Shtei Halechem? So you would say the Shtei Halechem is a matir that allows Chadash to be in the Beis Hamikdash. Simple, right? That's what it is. Very easy. That's what it does. Okay, but now if I ask, what role do the lambs play in the Shtei Halechem? Right? If I tell you, just give Shtei Halechem, and then you're allowed to have Chadash in the Mikdash if you were 49 days before, like you were allowed to have it in your house, in Sat or Mitzvah Yericho, or wherever you live, right? So then you're allowed to have it in your house. So what do you have with the lambs? What are the lambs doing? So what I want to say is that the lambs enhance the Shtei Halechem by connecting them to the idea of a classic korban, right? In other words, that's what the lambs are doing. Okay, I would compare it somewhat to, and no, that's a poor comparison, so I'm not going to. Okay, so in any case, I was going to say like wine to kiddush, right? Where it's not essential to the idea of making kiddush that you need a cup of wine, or to a wedding, or to a bris milah, or anything like that. But it enhances it. But I think here it's a little different. It's more than just a regular enhancement. I think that it allows it. It sort of brings it into the world of karbanos, the Shtei Halechem. I think that's the role that the kevis is playing. Okay, so let's go now through the. This will be a short share, I guess, today, but let's go through now the 4 opinions that we had in the Gemara about whether or not the animals are ma'akev the bread, or the bread is ma'akev the animals. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through an opinion, then I say whose opinion it was, like Tanakama or Rikiba, whose opinion it was, then give their opinion, okay, on a basic level, like what they said, and then what their psak is, and then the svara behind them, as I understand. Okay, that's.
Rabbi, do you want to share your chart?
No, that gives away the whole shiur. Right? Of course not. So my notes. Right? My kids try that during when I give shiur, they try grabbing the notes. It has the answer sheet on. So, teachers.
It's not like we're being tested.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's like teachers give up their notes. I never understand people who give up their notes. Like that's the good part. It's, anyway.
What about a chart that you can fill in as you're giving the background?
I asked for my students. I've never given. I was planning. The truth is, I had prepared this shiur 2 years ago to give my students, and I think they ended school before Shavuos for some reason, so I never ended up giving the shiur. So I always had this shiur ready and available. And then when I was thinking, what shiur should I give on the Sunday shiur? So which is what I call the shiur, the Sunday shiur. So then so I was like, okay, well, let's prepare for Shavuos. And you realize it's very little you can prepare for Shavuos. But this is the mitzvah of Shiur. So I was like, okay, so let's go through the sugya. I never gave the shiur before. Let's give it. Okay. So the Tanakama had said, right, that he was the first one in the Mishna. Hence Tanakama. So he says, par elim kvasim basir im akin lechem. So he says that the par, the elim and the kvasim are not akin lechem, and the lechem is not ma'akiv them. Right. So we said they're independent of each other. Right. That's what we explained it then. That's how I explain it now. He sees each of these entities as independent korbanos, independent offerings of each other, and they do not need anything else. They can be given on their own. Okay. Then you had Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva said that the lechem was ma'akev the kvasim, right? So the lechem, without the lechem, you can't give the kvasim, and the kvasim are not ma'akev the lechem. Okay. So right. So what's Rabbi Kiva's svar here? Right, he's clearly seeing that the bread is the main thing, right? So, right, that's how he's understanding. So, Shtei Halechem is the main entity here, and the animals are on the side, right? So really, what I think what Rabbi Kiva is saying is that the lechem is really the purpose of the keves, of the lambs, right? They're what makes the keves kadosh. That's what's happening here. So without the lechem, there's no point of the lambs, right? And there's no separate korban of kvasim on Shavuos, as right. The kvasim are coming just to accompany the Shtei Halechem. So the lambs are going to have no effect on the Shtei Halechem. You have to give the Shtei Halechem, right? They have zero effect on the Shtei Halechem, and the Shtei Halechem doesn't need the kvasim. They enhance the Shtei Halechem. But it doesn't need it. You have a mitzvah to give the Shtei Halechem. That's the mitzvah. The kvasim are ancillary to a certain extent, and so they can't be ma'akev. They enhance it. But if push comes to shove, you only have one. So then you're only going to give the lechem, and you don't need the lambs. And if you don't have the lechem, so you look at the lambs, like, what are you guys doing here? We don't need you. We have no reason for it. Okay. Rav Shimon ben Nanos said, he said the opposite. He said the kvasim are ma'akev, so they are ma'akev the lechem, and the lechem are not ma'akev the kvasim. And what was his proof? Where did he get that from? From the desert. In the desert, they only gave the kvasim, right? They didn't have the lechem to give. So what was the idea? So the lambs are matir. This is his opinion, what I think. They allow the lechem to be given, okay? Because the lambs are the korban, okay? So the animal korban always exists without the lechem, right? There's no such thing as just the animals that are just randomly, right? An animal can always be a korban, right? But a lechem can't be a korban unless it's brought into the mikdash with a korban. It doesn't exist on its own. He disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, right? You see, fundamentally disagrees with Rabbi Akiva as to what the lechem is doing, right? The lechem needs korban.
Sorry, Rabbi. So is like the kavana or the intent of the ram relevant to that last, or any of the opinions, specifically the last one? Let's say you hold a ram back for a korban tamid or whatever, a different korban, but then you want to use it for the Shtei Halechem. Does it matter?
Oh yeah, so that's an interesting question of people. That's a larger issue of which I have no expertise in. Once you designate an animal as one thing, no, it's the answer to your question is going to have nothing to do with your question, right? Because
so I'll refine the question because I'm just trying. If the ram is like an ikr to the Shtei Halechem, then you can't just say, well, if you don't have the bread, then yes, of course you can give a korban, but you can't give this korban.
Oh, so I don't know if you designate. It's a good question. I don't think so, but I wouldn't say I'm 100% sure. But I don't think you designate the lambs as associated with the lechem, at least until the very last moment that you set them aside. The question would be, let me refine your question a little to get to the answer. But I don't know the answer. But this is how you would ask the question. The answer would be the question would be as follows: If you said it, I think maybe you actually said it. If you set aside these basim, and then it turns out that the lechem gets lost or whatever, and now you just have these basim sitting there. They've already been hektish. So the question would be: you find, I don't know the answer, but you find two possibilities in the gamut of halacha that could happen. One, you just give them anyway. Or two, you have to set them aside to graze until they develop a mum, like a blemish on them, and then you can sell them and use the money for a different purpose. So I think that's really what would answer your question, even though that's not what you're trying to answer.
No, I understand. But so in terms of this third opinion, if something happened to the bread, would you bring the korban anyway?
Right. I don't know the answer. Right. That's a question. Right. I'm not sure because then we're not dealing with them. That's not where they're seeing the halacha go. Okay. The last opinion is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says the halacha is like that. Not us, but he disagreed with the reasoning, right? Because he said that when you get to Eretz Yisrael, right, it has nothing to do with what happened in the Midbar. All of halacha essentially changed at that point when it came to karbanos and everything. Right, so he says that he would hold that the lechem requires a matir to be brought, and that's the lambs, right? So the lambs can't be brought without the bread can't be brought without the lambs, but the lambs can always be brought, right? So again, same type. The conceptual is the same. The question is whether or not we learn it from the midbar. Right, that's in essence their argument. Because his psak is the exact same thing, but he's just saying that when in the desert things are different. The question that I would ask on Rabbi Shimon, and I should have put some more thought into it, is Rabbi Shimon disagree as to the conceptual role of the bread in the desert, since there was no bread, right? So when he says that things change when you get into Eretz Yisrael, is it that the roles of each thing within the mitzvah change, or is it that now, and this is what I think would be more appropriate for the answer, is that in the desert we weren't able to do certain things, right? We were held back from doing certain things, while in Eretz Yisrael we weren't held back from doing those things. So therefore, the mitzvah and the way it was designed is able to be actualized in Eretz Yisrael, while it wasn't able to be actualized in the midbar. So the mitzvah didn't change in as much as the ability to perform the mitzvah in its ideal way was able to be done once we crossed into Eretz Yisrael, and that's where Rabbi Shimon disagrees with Rabbi Ben with Ben Nanas, except for the fact that their psak is exactly the same, right? Because if the psak was different, then we'd have some serious questions to ask. Okay, that's the end of this year.
Rabbi, on the first opinion, I forgot which rabbi said it, which there were
we didn't have any comma, so
right. Does he say that either one could allow you to eat the chadash? Like they're interchangeable in that way?
No, so I don't. The answer to the question is he's saying in the base of mikdash, chadash in the base of mikdash, right? So could you right? So that's the that would be the question. Could you, I guess the question would be, according to Tanakama, who holds that they're independent of each other, if you just gave the klasim in the base and you have chadash in the base of mikdash, I would assume yes, because then what, you can never eat chadash in the base of mikdash? That seems impossible, right? It's like nowadays, right? We're allowed to eat chadash even though we don't give the korban. So it seems like there's also like a time element that just the time runs out that you're allowed to, right? The question
Right,
is like.
But I think Scott's question, and Scott, tell me if I'm wrong, is a little different of if I can either one of them trigger the desired result.
Right. So I'm saying, I'm saying that there's a third path.
Right. So right, but
Right.
which is fine, but that's
Right.
that's
And the real
time.
question, I tell like this. Let me refine Scott's question a little bit more, which is, could the animals act as a matir for chadash? Whether or not the chadash is going to be matir or not, but could they act as a matir for chadash? So it seemed like my answer would be no, because the matir for chadash is Shtei Halechem, not the animals, But in the midbar, how are they using chadash wheat? I mean, they didn't have wheat really. There was no like it in the midbar. So that's the question. If you would ask them in the base of mikdash, right, or in the Mishna, why are you giving these tfasim here? They'd be like, oh, these are the tfasim the Shtei Halechem. Okay, so where's the Shtei Halechem? So like that's the question. So they say no, these just revert back to a normal korban. That's what they are right now. So I don't think they would say these are in place of Shtei Halechem. This is what's matir chadash in the base of mikdash. That's what I'd say, but I don't know for sure. I'm right. Okay, that's our short shiur for today. Next week we're gonna do a more sugya on Yontif. But there we'll do a sugya on Yontif on Shechianu on the Lukas and Erev. So it applies to Shavuos, but also applies to every other Yontif as well. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Well,
Have
Rabbi,
a much
Rabbi,
happier week this week.
yeah, you want to stay? Can you stay on for 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop there.